in the end, the players that will take part in the World Cup, they will face quite a few challenges.
The soccer players just aren't taking enough carbohydrate on, even if we said the lower initial target of 60 grams is right. They're getting nowhere near it. And what people are now looking at are these nootropics. They've not got the carbohydrate right. They might be dehydrated. So we're looking for the things that might have a 1%, but we're ignoring 5 things that have got a 25%. By the time you get back into the changing rooms, you could have missed that 1 hour window. So what I was doing, I'm beginning to think we're getting our caffeine wrong. And let me explain what I mean by that.
Welcome to this episode of this FSI Talk, our podcast series, where the best experts in the world come together to talk about football. It's with you. It's Francisco Reyes. I'm the general manager of FSI, and today I'm still in the host to Alberto to be with you and talk about nutrition properly. Today's FSI talk is called Fuel Behind Elite Football. And we are celebrating the new master's course about the football nutritionist, where Graeme Close and Anja Horina are professors there. So, and did a lot of work putting this into the reality. So I want to say welcome, Graeme Close and Anja Horina. Please introduce yourself briefly. Over to you, Anja.
Yes, hi, Thren. Thank you very much for the invitation, and it's great to be here. So my name is Anja Horina. I'm a sports dietitian, and I've been working in elite football for quite some time now. And currently also working with different kind of team sports and sports in general. And I'm just very, very happy to share my knowledge.
Thank you. Over to you, Graeme.
Again, thank you for the invitation. It's always a pleasure working with you, Fran. So my name's Professor Graeme Close. I'm a professor of human physiology at Liverpool John Moores University, where I'm also the director of a research institute for sport and exercise sciences. So looking after the research direction of the institute. On top of that, as you say, I've contributed many lectures onto the FSI program in the areas of my expertise. And then away from academia, I'm also a sport nutrition consultant. I'm currently working with the likes of Everton Football Club in the Premier League, the British and Irish Lions rugby, and England rugby. So a variety of sports.
Okay, thank you so much. Let's dive into the main topic today. As you both know, as the game becomes faster and more demanding, nutrition is playing a bigger role than ever in both physical and cognitive performance, as you probably know. We are seeing now a lot of players using carbohydrate gels, for instance, before matches, at halftime, and even during games, raising new questions about how much fuel footballers really need. We'll also explore recovery in decision-making under fatigue and how challenges like heat and altitude could impact performance heading into the 2026 World Cup. And to talk about all of that, let's dive into the questions. Let's go straight to the topic. First one is a big one, okay? So let's try to debrief a little bit, depict a little bit, the challenge. Looking ahead at 2026 World Cup in North America, Graeme, you recently were there. Players will face extreme heat and altitude. How these extreme environments alter fueling and fatiguing football players? It's up to you who starts. Anja, go ahead.
Okay. Well, I can start definitely. So in the end, the players that will take part in the World Cup, they will face quite a few challenges. It's not only the heat, it's also the altitude, it's travel, it's especially coming from Europe. They will have a long haul travel as well, which can be quite challenging. So especially with the heat, the problem is that not only we face the topic of dehydration, which is a challenge in its own, but it's also due to the high heat. There will be an increased carbohydrate utilization as well. It's just getting more exhausting for the players, and performance can be like really deteriorated if heat increases the way it's actually expected to for the World Cup. And yeah, it's also going to be quite a cognitive topic as well, because the cognitive fatigue due to the really high temperatures, that's also something that we have to consider. And certainly there are things that we can do nutritionally, but we'll definitely go into detail there. So with dehydration, which I will focus on the first. The main things nutritionally are that you have to make sure that fluid consumption is well planned, and you have a good fluid consumption throughout the day before the match actually starts. Ideally, you would be able to plan it individually, player by player, and have the strategies in place with both cooling strategies as well as adequate fluid intake. With the increased loss of fluid through sweat, there will be deteriorations, or there could be deteriorations in performance over the course of the game. So that's really critical to make sure that we can avoid this. Graeme, maybe if you want to jump in there.
Yes, over to Graeme.
So that I'm not
what do you
holding
think?
a monologue.
Yeah, I mean, Anja, you raised some great points. And then the other one that we might need to throw into the mix is that I believe there's some games will also be in Mexico, so we'll have the added challenge of altitude that goes along with it. I think if you was talking nutritionally about the heat, I would summarize it as there's going to be three major challenges. One you've touched on, which is hydration. You know, people could be losing up to 5 to 6 kilograms of fluid a game. So what we do know is in sports like soccer, there's limited times to get fluid on board. So I'd be interested to see ever any rule changes where they'll have water breaks and cooling breaks. When I worked at the French Rugby World Cup of England, we were allowed cooling breaks, and then it was really getting a strategy in place of what do we do in that 90-second cooling break, and how do we get the practicalities of nutrition right. So one I'd say is hydration. Number two is carbohydrate. We know in the heat you're going to have an increased demand for carbohydrate. Our research tells us that soccer players don't take enough carbohydrate on board anyway mid-game. And if there's an increased reliance on carbohydrate in the heat, which we know, and at altitude, that can become even more problematic. And I guess the third one, which maybe less people think about, are any gastrointestinal discomfort. We know that in the heat, that increases gastrointestinal discomfort. And then what we're now doing is asking to take more carbohydrate on board at a time when there's already GI discomfort. You might find that players are getting stomach cramps. So I think getting good practical strategies for carbohydrate, hydration, and gastrointestinal will be the priority for any nutritionist working at this tournament.
Yeah, this is sounds pretty interesting to me, because as you know, it's well known when you are under high heat conditions, the digestion is so difficult sometimes when you are taking some carbohydrates. So curious about Graeme and Anja, if you have any protocol or any strategy to facilitate the digestion, and then get the goal, no, that the footballer take the carbohydrates they need to perform at the highest level.
Yeah, the first thing I would say is that we need to get the players used to taking more carbohydrate on board. They need to start that now, and we need to start thinking of strategies to get that onto the field. I'm sure the teams will already be reaching out to FIFA to ask what is the likely chances of there being cooling and fluid and hydration breaks within the game. In terms of the gastrointestinal, we might look at things like probiotic supplementation leading into it. which has been shown to be effective. With the altitude, we might want to look at things like iron in advance, so get all our players screened thoroughly in ahead of a tournament, ready for supplementing if anyone is deficient in iron. But I think the key thing is, like anything, we're going to train to play well, but we should also train our nutrition and start practicing them strategies now.
Yeah, Anja, what do you think?
Exactly, like as Graeme said, like training the gut is essential, especially when you're prone to having GI discomfort anyway. And with the heat and the dehydration, it can just be exacerbated. So definitely that needs to be already done. And ideally, there would be enough time in advance to practice it, which we all know will be quite a challenge, especially with the European tournament just finishing not long before the World Cup actually starts.
Yeah.
So and also like what we have to consider, not only like when it comes to the GI issues, not only it's the heat and the altitude, but also travel can disrupt, like the jet lag can disrupt the gastrointestinal system, so or can influence it as well. So that's definitely something that needs to be prepared for, and individualized strategies should be ideally found for each individual. But yeah, definitely.
And something that came up.
Working with a team, would you be thinking about reducing some of the fiber content perhaps in the pre-match meal to try and give the gut a little bit of extra support?
Yeah, so yeah, absolutely. I mean, that could be one strategy to help with gastrointestinal comfort. Like in general, before the game, trying to go for a low fiber content, easy to digest foods, low fat, lower in protein, just so that you get the carbohydrate amount and make sure that athletes can actually ingest the amount of energy that they need without having to worry about any side effects, if you want to say so. Definitely that would be one strategy, but also the days before the games, not only like the meal before, but also the days in advance, and just focusing on the foods that are well tolerated. And yeah, not to forget also thinking about food hygiene in a different country. Making
I'm glad you said that with fiber, because that's something I tried to do when I've got a warm game, and just like to check it with other experts so that you also agree. I think the other thing to mention, Fran, is that temperature. So I'm a big fan of using things like ice slushies, and that's not just to cool the body, but to cool the gut. And we know that one of the reasons why we'll get gastrointestinal distress is because of the temperature. So actually using cold liquids. So, and actually there's probably pictures of myself at the Rugby World Cup in France where we actually took ice slushies onto the field in that 90-second drinks break. So not only were we giving liquids, but we were trying to get them really cold as well. So I think that's a very simple, practical strategy we can think about. And at the same time, in them cooling breaks, we had ice cold sprays to spray the back of the neck. We ice towels. Things that you wouldn't think are nutritional, like cooling the body, can have major effects nutritionally by protecting the gut.
Yeah, that's right. And I guess that, I think at a certain extent, you individualize the plan for every footballer. I mean, everybody doesn't have the same gastrointestinal dysfunction or whatever. Some players can tolerate more certain foods or certain meals and others. Do you adapt this plan for each player, or do you have a general protocol and then, you are seeing how does it work?
Yeah, well, I can certainly talk about what I did in the World Cup in France when it was really warm. So building up to the tournament, we were lucky that we managed to get the England rugby team into my heat chambers here at the university at Liverpool John Moores, and we were able to see which players reacted badly in the heat. And by reacting badly, I mean spiked to core temperature, got a really high sweat rate, for example. So people who we thought, okay, and then at that point, these were the players that we targeted pre, during, and post So we were a bit more aggressive with the pre-cooling in players who we knew had a chance of going really high. When there were these breaks in play, these were the ones that we targeted specifically with the cooling strategies. We looked at things like pre-exercise paracetamol, where to reduce core temperature. And it's not that we didn't look after everyone, but there were certain players that we were like, okay, yeah, we need to be really aggressive here. And also there were some players who lost a lot of body weight but didn't consume a lot of fluid. And then it was an education piece to say that, look, you are losing 4 or 5 kilos, but your fluid intake was only 300, 400 mils. So rather than just wetting your mouth when liquid comes on, we need you to actually consume some fluid and try. So I think that getting as much information as you can on your athletes in advance to allow you to individualize it is crucial.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
So let's move on to the next question. That is probably is linked to this first one. No, in elite football, we are seeing players. We've talked about take gels at the start, at the halftime, sometimes after during the second half, no, or breaks. With some endurance athletes pushing 120 grams of carbs per hour. Is that level of fueling applicable in football? Is something not applicable? Obviously, the sport is different. But what is really necessary for performance to keep the highest performance as possible with our soccer players in terms of how the quantity or the amount of carbs they have to take?
Yeah, so Graeme, I'll just jump in there first. So basically, as you said it already, the sport is different. If you compare endurance sport to football, it's just a different story. But nevertheless, that higher need for carbohydrates just stems from that higher intensity that the game just got throughout the last decades. That's why that's the driver for this kind of conversation, I guess. So if we think about football, if you think about the lack of fueling windows actually that you have compared to endurance cycling, for instance, or endurance sports, and also the nature of the sport where you have a lot of changes of direction, jumping,
Anaerobic,
drinks, etc. It's just different. So we just have to keep that in mind when thinking about what the right carbohydrate recommendations would be. And as we already covered in before, problem of gastrointestinal issues, it can just that's something that we have to consider. With the lack of gut or GI training or gut training, and players not tolerating that kind of carbohydrate amount. So I guess if we go back, it's still individualization is the key. Even if it's a team environment, you still need to see what the player actually tolerates, what the preferences of the player is. Do they like to consume something fluid? Do they like to consume gels? Do they like to consume more solid foods that deliver carbohydrates? So what actually does the player tolerate? What does he like? And also how much is ingested beforehand, how much does he already ingest during the game, and then see where the gaps, and also consider that 120 grams of carbs is quite a high amount, even for
Yes,
an
it's probably too much. No, that is the following question that I would ask. Now, what is the normal or the range of amount of carbohydrates to take in a match? No, for British Graeme, do you have something?
Sorry, Graeme, go ahead.
Well, what I was going to say is we're having a lot of debate now about what is the optimal amount. So a lot of people are jumping on about 60 grams an hour for soccer.
60 grams an hour.
60 grams an hour. Now, in sports like the marathon now, without doubt, the secret to running a sub 2 hour marathon is getting that much higher. And the reports are coming out that the sub 2 hour marathon was around about 120 grams an hour. So double that of what we need in soccer. And what I think the mistake now people are making is trying to know, say, well, that must be what soccer needs as well, because marathon's gone to 120, 150 grams an hour. And I do think that's a mistake. So I think 60 grams is about right. What I would say, though, is we're having all these scientific debates, 60, 90, 120. We did a study last year with Andy Casper in the Journal of Sports Sciences. And Andy is the nutritionist at Newcastle United Football Club.
Yeah. An FSI professor too.
An FSI professor as well. And he's probably talked about this in the lectures. But what Andy did was measure the carbohydrate intake of elite Premier League players during a game. And the average intake was 17 grams an hour, 17.
Yeah.
So we're trying to decide, should we get from 60 or 70 or 80 or even up to 120? Well, the reality is the players are not getting anywhere near the lower target that we would even want. So I don't think the debate should be how high should we push it. The debate should be, how do we get players to get more carbohydrate on board?
Yeah.
And one of the major challenges is, how do you do it in the constraints of a soccer game when the referees don't allow drinks to come onto the field? So we talk a lot at Liverpool, John Moores, about science versus application.
Yeah.
And to move the bar on, we need great science and we need great application. I think we've got great science. What we now need to work really hard on is, how do we apply that science? And what we know is that the soccer players just aren't taking enough carbohydrate on, even if we said the lower initial target of 60 grams is right. They're getting nowhere near it.
Yeah, that is the main issue at the end, no? If we don't get your players to believe that they have to take that amount of carbohydrates, and they are not willing to take it, you have an issue there. So there is always a gap between science and application of real application. Also in locker rooms, probably you know this better than me. Players are copying strategies. No, if my best player is taking gels, probably others are gonna follow, and they are gonna take gels too, because they want to replicate that performance. So curious about it, how, as a nutritionist, professional nutritionist, how you put in practice these protocols, taking advantage of these kind of things. But at the end of the day, you need the players to get into the protocols. So if not, it's not useful. Curious about that. If you had
one
tricks
thing I do is I try. People will generally drink according to the thirst.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're in the fortunate position that you've been in a professional changing room, what I would encourage all the nutritionists to do is, when the team go out for the second half, weigh the water bottles that have got the sports drinks in. And what you will find is that you might give somebody a sports drink that's got 30 grams of carbohydrate in it. They may have had 2 or 3 small drinks. They're not going to drink that bottle to get the carbohydrate needs. They're going to drink according to their thirst. So I try and separate hydration and carbohydrate out. So what I might use, for example, is a little shot of carbohydrate that's got 40 grams of carbohydrate in.
That's
physically hand that to the player and say, slam that. And we have this conversation up front. Regardless of how thirsty you are, knock that back. I now know they've had 40 grams. Then I will hand them a water bottle. And at that point, they can drink to thirst. Or I might hand them a sports drink bottle as well, so they can have a bit more carbohydrate.
Mm-hmm.
But the first thing I want them to do is have a shot. And whether that's a gel or a shot, but some way to get a concentrated amount of carbohydrate in them. And then I hand them a water bottle at that stage.
Yeah, that sounds pretty good.
And that comes back kind of again to that individual preference of the players. Some just take the gel, some take the shot, some take some carbohydrate jellies. So you need to know the player, and what they want and what they prefer needs to be there so that they can actually take it. And there can't be any barrier, because in the halftime they will think about everything else probably. Then where can I find my shot, my gel, etc. So ideally, if you're in the locker room as a nutritionist, then make sure that you plan everything and prepare everything so that the player doesn't have to think about it. They just take it and down
I
it.
mean, you raise a great point there. And again, I'm sorry to go back to rugby, but it's a sport I've spent most of the time in. And I think the mentality is similar. So when I was first doing work in this sport, what I would do is I know exactly what each player wanted, and I would lay it out and I'd sit it on the seat for them. So if they walked in, they saw it straight away.
Yeah.
And I thought that's a great system. Until what you observe is becoming tired, knock it away with the hand so they can sit down, and then forget. So even though it's on the seat, you walk out and you look, and most of them products are still there unopened. So now what I do is not only do I have it on the seat, but I will then walk around and hand it out. Have you had your shot? Have you had your shot? And I'll physically hand it to them. And the amount of times a player will thank me for handing them a shot when actually I know it's also on the seat, but they've not even seen it because the mind is racing everywhere. And I get it because, you know, they might be on a high of just taking the lead. They might be a bit stressed that they're behind. You've got all these things running through the mind. Probably the least important thing in their mind at that point is fueling.
Yeah.
But we know if they don't get that right, they're blowing up with 20 minutes to go. So my tip for any nutritionist is they're not being lazy, they're not being rude or arrogant, but just appreciate the amount of things in a player's mind. Your best laid plans might not happen. Physically hand it to your player.
Yeah.
And ideally take multiple rounds and go like one round first, and then coach would say some words, and then at the end again you go
Another round.
like,
Another round.
did you have your gel or whatever? It's just
Yeah.
insurance policy that
Yeah, I think
Get it.
the nature of the sport is quite different. It's different in cycling or in tennis, for instance, that, you know, players are taking, you know, paying attention all the time to fueling, to hydration, because, you know, it's an individual sport. But when you have all these emotions in your mind in the break, during the break, maybe you forget that you have to take the shot, no? Because of it's not the proper nature of the sport, no?
yeah.
So yeah, go. Sorry.
No,
Go
and I just want to say that the play is so individual, because you can have some that have that in their minds, and they are so in their details, and they know exactly, okay, they have the gel and it's a habit and they take it. But then especially the younger players, they still need to develop that kind of habit.
the habit.
They need to understand that it actually helps them to perform better in the second half or in the rest of the games, so in the rest of the game that they have. So it's also a matter of making sure that they know why we do it, but then still helping them to develop that habit.
Yeah, that's great, because I think all nutritionists that are gonna watch the episode are gonna appreciate your advices about this, because sometimes it's obvious, but you don't know how to approach it, no? When you are not in elite sports or you are trying to convince your players. Let's move on to a question that, you know, personally I'm really interested in, because in my background, I have some neuroscientific, research that I did in the past. So I have a colleague that were, researching the effect of exercises in cognitive performance. So this becomes, really important when it comes to, a World Cup under heat or altitude or whatever, and then we have to plan the nutrition plan for our players. So carbohydrates probably and nutrition affects, the way players performs. It could affect the passing, it could affect the decision making, and all the coaches are obsessed literally with decision making. They want their players to make the right decisions. When you are tired, when you are dehydrated, when you don't have enough fuel, it could affect your performance. How do you see this? And asking, are we feeding our soccer's brains properly for the demands of this sport? What do you think?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in at first, Anja, if you want to
Yeah, you should.
jump ahead. I think you're right that cognitive function is becoming a real trendy topic. And what people are now looking at are these nootropics. So these are the specific supplements that are claimed to help with cognitive function. But this relates to everything in nutrition. I see people looking for a nootropic, but they've not got the carbohydrate right. And we know about carbohydrate and cognitive function. They might be dehydrated, and we know about hydration and cognitive function. They maybe not taken creatine, and we know that there's emerging evidence now about creatine and cognitive function. So we're looking for the things that might have a 1%, but we're ignoring 5 things that have got a 25%. So I go back to let's get the basics right. And then my controversial one, I like a bit of controversy. My controversial one is I'm beginning to think we're getting our caffeine wrong. And let me explain what I mean by that. Is what we know is that caffeine at around about the 2 milligrams per kilogram mark will improve cognitive functioning.
Attention, focus.
Yeah, correct. If we take too much, it has the opposite effect. It begins to decrease it. So you can overstimulate.
Yeah.
But what we forget is, let's say, for example, if it's an evening kickoff, the chances are that our players might have had 3 or 4 coffees during the day. And then be getting to a change room, they might have a caffeine gel and some caffeine chewing gum. And then there might be a caffeine gummy. And then they might have a caffeine shot. And before you know it, they have gone well beyond this 2 milligram per kilogram body mass mark.
Yeah.
And they've overstimulated.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think we all forget is that the caffeine literature was all developed on cognitive function in a laboratory environment.
Yeah, not a sports environment.
Yeah, and not a stadium.
World Cup, where surely, do we really need a stimulant to walk out for the opening game of a football World Cup, the biggest moment in your life? Do we need something that's going to raise our adrenaline at that point? Or actually, would we be better with something there that actually made us
To calm down.
relax a
Calm
little
down.
bit more and try and take away that pressure? I think it's really interesting that one of the things that the British and Irish Lions was really good at doing this summer was before we went to any game, we had a really good mental coach, Gary, and he would do some breathing and some relaxation exercises with us
Meditation.
in the stadium, in the hotel before we went. So we'd all get in a circle, do some really good breath work about getting ourselves a little bit more calm and ready to take it. And that's completely opposite to let's fill you full of stimulants. So in terms of cognitive function, I do wonder whether are we getting the carbs right, the creatine right, the hydration right, and are we potentially overstimulating with caffeine?
Yeah. It makes totally sense for me. And also when you have in those events, an opening game in the World Cup or even the final, or you are fighting for winning the Premier League or whatever, you have enough cortisol in your blood, right? You don't need caffeine. In the opposite, you need to calm down the players, to perform better, to make good decisions or whatever. So, yeah, there is a practice also, a lot of us, at least, taking too much caffeine, I think.
I think so. I started thinking about this several years ago, Fran, when it was the day before the opening game of the Rugby World Cup, the day before. And as the team, you go to the stadium to do like a walkthrough and just walk around the stadium, a very light training session on the field, very, very light. But it's more just to get ready for the day after. And I was walking onto the field the day before, and I felt my heart rate going with anxiety. I'm not a player, and it's the day before a game.
Imagine the player.
I started thinking exactly about what are our players going to be thinking tomorrow as a player?
Yeah.
If my heart rate is going high now, day before, and I'm a nutritionist.
Yeah.
I said a bit about my mental health and not the players, but it got me thinking as, should we be doing things to help our players cope with that higher stress environment?
Yeah.
Or should we be putting more caffeine in? And I think place the caffeine in a sports changing room is potentially half time.
Yeah.
Where sometimes at half time, you don't want the half time to come and you can feel like everything's relaxed and calmed down. And with the advent of things like the caffeine chewing gum and the caffeine melts that immediately
Yeah.
start to work, I think we can hold back on the caffeine a little bit pre-game and potentially, if needed, educate our players that if needed at half time. But if you don't need it, don't take it.
Yeah, because the initial excitement will be a little bit less in halftime,
Yeah.
and then you can, definitely.
You can
And I
see
go back to my playing days. Sometimes I did feel a bit flat, but you're on a real high at half time. You don't want half time to come. You sit down and you've got to pick yourself up to go again. And I wonder whether that's a time when we can introduce caffeine a bit better.
could be
Yeah, totally
interesting
agree.
to monitor heart rate during their pre-game routine in players and see how players are reacting to the environment and stress. It could be something interesting to adapt their routine. And also, I want to highlight that you can see lately LeBron James in the NBA world. LeBron James, Stephen Curry, Anthony Edwards sitting in the bench pre-game, closing their eyes and breathing and trying to visualize the game, trying to relax because of what you said. Now, Graeme, they have enough excitement during a playoff game, and then they need to be focused. So
Yeah.
let's give it here. Let's throw here this controversial question, and hopefully the audience is gonna jump in and comment about that. But it's something to study definitely.
Let me ask you a question, Fran. Do you play golf?
Golf? No.
Okay. And did you play golf?
Unfortunately, not.
I need a golfer.
It's a time problem, but I definitely
time
like
to
to try
start?
it.
I'll tell you why I need a golfer. So I've recently done a study. You mentioned heart rate there, Fran. We put heart rate monitors on golfers for a game of golf. And obviously golf isn't a high intensity sport. But the heart rate before the very first shot of the day is through the roof. And after that, it's now quite standard. And as a golfer myself, I know that my first shot of the day, I do feel nervous and anxious, and the heart rate goes high.
Yeah.
And then it settles down, and then that same shot 2 hours later isn't high again. And that's my thought about not giving it pre-game, but giving it at half time, because I think then anxiety and then nerves are all there before the game, and then it settles. And I think that's when we might be able to look at it. But yeah,
No,
there's
makes
my
total
golf
sense.
analogy.
Yeah,
Makes
no,
total sense.
absolutely. And it links again back to the topic of gastrointestinal symptoms, because if you are that excited and having a really high dose of caffeine, that can also contribute to
Correct.
symptoms
Yeah,
that are not
that is a great point. Let's go into the last one because we could be talking for hours, I'm pretty sure. Let's go for the last one, and we promise to come back with another episode about talking about the protein supplements and everything, because that is a whole world too. What is the immediate post-match recovery window in the dressing room so critical, or becoming so critical, especially during a congested tournament schedule? Why so critical in terms of nutrition plan and best practices to recover?
Yeah.
Anja.
You want to say that, Anja, or do you want me?
Definitely.
go.
So the thing is, there are multiple things that actually play a
Mhm.
role. One thing is that with a soccer game or a football game, you deplete your glycogen stores. So that means you need to replenish the energy.
Okay.
Glycogen stores are stored in the muscle and in the liver. You have those stores, and they're basically, your energy reservoir. And they will be depleted, or at least partially depleted, until the end of the game. And that's then the recovery part to actually refill them. The problem with the games that we have, or with the schedules that we have right now in football, is that there's not that much time to actually replenish or refill those stores, like to the total extent. Because if you have a game 3 days after the last game, you just need to use the time to really give your body back everything that it needs to function well. So that's the one side of the story. And certainly you also need to rebuild some parts of the muscle, or to recover the muscle well from the intense activity, from tackles, etc. So that's the other part where the protein comes into place. So I think those are the main reasons why recovery is just a really important window and time frame to consider. Graeme, do you want to add anything to that before we go into the practical application?
Yeah, I guess you can. I won't go too much into the science of it. What we know is that to get carbohydrate into the muscle, you normally need an insulin response. So you eat carbohydrate, insulin response, we get carbohydrate into the muscle. Exercise itself opens a window of about 1 hour where we don't need insulin, which the non-insulin dependent phase of reloading our muscle with carbohydrates.
Okay.
The transporters that we need actually move to the edge of the muscle, and they're basically shouting, "Get me some carbohydrates."
Yeah.
And this lasts for about an hour. Okay. And I've done some research in our group where we've taken muscle biopsies, and you can actually measure a carbohydrate in the muscle. And even if we give the same amount of carbohydrate after the game, but we delay it by 1 hour, 2 days later, when we take a biopsy, there's less carbohydrate in that muscle. So we think about a tournament situation in football where we might be playing every 3 to 4 days. If we don't take advantage of that non-insulin dependent phase at first hour, then actually 3 to 4 days later, when you play that second game, you might be starting your game 75% full rather than 100% full.
Yeah.
Now, the practical thing that you need to take into consideration, particularly in a World Cup, and I had this year with the British and Irish Lions in Australia, is that in big occasions, you can sometimes be on the field for nearly an hour after the game. Whether you're having pictures with family, you're doing press, you're doing media, you're walking around the stadium, all the different things that go on within that environment. By the time you get back into the changing rooms, you could have missed that 1 hour window. So what I was doing is each individual had their own recovery drink made based on their own flavor profile. I printed labels out to get the name on it and what was in it. And as the game finished, I was walking onto the field, handing the recovery to each individual player. And then we started that recovery process. Then when they get into the changing rooms, there was food available. And then they went for the post-match meal. And that's perfect, because what we think you need to do is give a good amount of carbohydrate on the hour, every hour for 3 hours. So immediately we give around about 90 grams of carbohydrate. They get into the changing rooms. They might be adding some things like some potato wedges, some sushi, even pizza, things like that. They're getting about 90 grams of carbohydrate. And then they get back to the team hotel where there's a recovery meal. They have maybe some pasta or something like that. We've now hit them 3 times, and we've maximized our chance to reload that muscle with carbohydrate.
Yeah, it could make the difference in the next game. If you are starting at 75%, probably you're gonna lose, right? Because you are not gonna perform. So we have to be well aware that we need to refuel to recover during that window. And I'm wondering, how you, what is the mix, no, in terms of carbohydrate and protein? We know the role of the protein in recovery too, to recover the muscle. So what is the proper mix? Or you fuel first carbohydrate, and then after, in the third window, no, at the huddle, they take the protein? How do you do that?
Yeah, my priority without doubt is carbohydrate in that first hour. That's what I try and make my priority. Having said that, you don't have to pick one over the other. So when I say about taking that recovery drink onto the field, what I would generally do is have a protein, carbohydrate, high liquid, high polyphenols, so with the things that will help the muscle soreness, all in one drink. So
Okay.
I've immediately given that. So I've got my protein in, I've got my polyphenols in. Interestingly, I'm beginning to think about some nutrition that might help to speed up caffeine elimination as well. So there's certain vegetables that might help us, because there'll be a lot of caffeine in the system, as we talked about. Can we try and get that out of the system quicker to help them sleep better that night? Also, can we put things into that recovery drink, such as with cherry juice, that has been shown to help with sleep as well? So we can try and do it all in one go. And then when you get into the changing rooms, I then let them choose what they want. So I'll have chicken, I'll have sushi, I'll have potato base, I'll have fruit kebabs. And then I let them choose a little bit more, but I know I've got everything I need into them in that drink.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't really add anything else to that other than that it's really crucial to have them have their shake or the recovery shake right away, because otherwise, if they stay out on the field for quite some time, they will drink some water, they will maybe drink some electrolyte, which at least gives some carbohydrates, or like a carb drink, but still the sheer amount of fluid in the stomach will then hinder them in, again, having another recovery shake in the locker room. If you only make it available to them there, then they should have the food, and then just some praise will just be like, okay, no, I can't have anything
can't.
because my stomach is just too full. Don't know, Graeme, if you had that experience before as well, but we also started to have the shake like right away, so that there can't be anything else.
Okay. Thank you so much, Graeme and Anja. It's time to leave it here. We promise that we are gonna be back with another episode talking about supplementation, which is a big topic too. And thank you so much. There are a lot of takeaways for nutritionists and also fitness coaches and people who are not directly working as a nutritionist, but they are managing teams and players, also personal trainers. So thank you so much for all the wise, all the knowledge. It's been a pleasure. And for our audience, thank you for being there. Thank you for watching us. Please, I encourage you to visit FSI.training and look our new football nutritionist master's course, which is absolutely outstanding. And thank you for being there. See you next time. Bye.
All right.
Bye bye. Thank you so much.